Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the marketplace. Coming up, Bank of Ghana governor has been meeting with bank MDs announcing sweeping regulatory reforms aimed at strengthening the financial sector.
Violate the principles of fair treatment and transparency. We expect all banks to review their pricing models and ensure that customer charges reflect ethical and commercially defensible standards.
Meanwhile, the central bank aims to cap non-performing loans at 10% by 2026. The governor has also been hinting of moves to blacklist loan defaulters.
It will cap NPL ratios at 10% of gross loans by December 2026. The measures will tighten restructuring rules, requiring sustained repayment before reclassification.
My name is Darryl Kwao. Thanks for being with us. Details coming up. First up, the Bank of Ghana has announced a new set of regulatory measures targeted at interest charges on digital platforms, pricing of FX transactions, non-performing loans, and recapitalization of commercial banks in the country. Some of the new directives will take off from July and August 2025, whilst another set will take off from 2026, especially when it comes to capping non-performing loans of financial institutions at 10%. Now, Bank of Ghana Governor Dr. Johnson Isiama announced this at a post-monetary policy committee meeting with MDs and CEOs of commercial banks at the headquarters of the central bank.
We've noticed a few issues in that area as well. We've noted a growing trend in the application of optional issuer fees, or what is called OIFs, when it comes to cross-currency card transactions. In principle, we recognize that these fees may reflect real costs. However, opaque pricing and limited disclosure have already begun to erode consumer trust and the integrity of payment systems. To this end, the Bank of Ghana will soon issue a directive, and the directive seeks to do a number of things. It seeks to address gaps, optional user fees when it comes to cross-currency card transactions, and we seek to cap these at 2%. Secondly, we will require the mandatory disclosure of all applicable OIFs to customers before a transaction is completed. Now, beyond this, we are also concerned about broader pricing practices that prevail in the sector. Indeed, we have received reports that some banks continue to apply interest charges on credit accounts that remain inactive. Even though they are inactive, some banks continue to apply interest charges, and this often results in cases where the accrued interest exceeds the original principal. Now, let me be clear, colleagues. Such practices are unacceptable and must end. They distort customer outcomes, they misrepresent the true profitability of lending portfolios, and they violate the principles of fair treatment and transparency. We expect all banks to review their pricing models and ensure that customer charges reflect ethical and commercially defensible standards.
The governor also spoke about moves to blacklist loan defaulters.
Soon issue a comprehensive directive to tackle persistently high non-performing loans across regulated financial institutions. We will consult with leadership of your association before the guidelines are issued. But let me say a bit on what the guidelines are. The measures will, for example, mandate write-offs of fully provisioned loans with no realistic recovery prospects, excluding related party exposures. It will cap NPL ratios at 10% of gross loans by December 2026. The measures will tighten restructuring rules requiring sustained repayment before reclassification. The measures will also enforce timely collateral recovery, especially for overdue loans. And then the measures will strengthen credit risk governance and require proof of effectiveness. The measures will enhance NPL reporting and disclosure with monthly submissions and public transparency. Then finally, the measures will restrict further credit to strategic or willful defaulters and share their identities with key financial sector oversight bodies. As part of this directive, banks will also be required to disclose blacklisted willful defaulters in their audited financial statements, along with sectoral breakdowns of NPL exposures. This added layer of transparency will sharpen both regulatory and investor focus on systemic credit risks.
And joining me for a Tuesday exchange on this is banking consultant Dr. Richmondi. Good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We just had the governor speak about some of these sweeping reforms. How would the interest rate regulations on digital lending platforms affect consumer access to credit and the profitability of fintech firms?
Thank you very much. I think the governor is being more proactive because the digital platform are lending money at certain rates. And I believe that we can have two players in the game where one is being controlled. You have your reserves that you have to meet. And then you have one who has no reserves and who is able to even give cheaper loans at a cheaper rate. So I believe that from where the governor is coming from, he wants to streamline with what we have with the traditional banking. And what he's going to do are very simple. He either introduce reserves for them or he set caps for them. Cap means that you cannot lend 10% or 15% at this and that, which I believe that it is good for the industry because you have one system giving money. I mean, we are talking about those who are able to, who have financial resources. These institutions, some of them have financial resources, and they're able to lend, and nobody is regulating it. So for me, I think it's a big plus for the government, at least bringing them into the global, in the Ghanaian context, so that they will also comply with the rules and regulations.
Well, the governor has also been speaking about Forex pricing guidelines. How would that have an impact on the city and the foreign exchange market?
Well, previously, we used to have, in the 90s, we used to have guidelines. You see, what the governor wants to do is that he wants to synchronize what the interbank rates are, what are the bank rates, and what are the Forex rates. So now he's going to come out with a rate, maybe a middle rate, for which it will bring all players into it. And again, he talks about certain fees. Some people are charging some fees, which to me is astronomical. Even this morning, my own bank account. I mean, I got up this morning. I only have a check account. I got up this morning. All the banks have done is that after leaving my current account balances, They have been consistently taxing me every day. This morning I got up and 1,000 cedis on my account. And I thought that Bank of Ghana would have to come to tell them. Because when we leave our monies with the bank, it is through that money they lend. So you are lending and getting money. And at the same time, you're charging me for leaving my deposit with you. And this is the reason why the governor is saying that he needs to look at all the fee structures, because the banks are not being fair to customers. And I'm very glad that he's taking them on this area so that we can synchronize the pricing system in the industry, including the domestic, not only foreign, domestic. Because if you charge me 100 cedis every month, when I leave my balances with you, you use it in trading, you use it for giving loans, you don't pay me anything. During President Kufuor's time, the minimum balance you leave where you are being credited with interest. They have stopped and they are charging us random. So for me, what the governor had to be very proactive, and he's been proactive, to streamline all these practices that is bedeviling the industry. So I don't have any challenge, any problem. The banks would have to sit up, because you can't have free money and at the same time surcharging the person every month for nothing.
Yeah, another headline from that meeting was capping of non-performing loans at 10% by 2026. That is ambitious. How prepared are Ghanaian banks to meet this target, and what strategies might they employ?
Thank you very much. You see, what the governor is saying is what is internationally being applied. If you read all the IMF documents published globally, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, you are not supposed to have more than 10% of your loan portfolio as non-performing. It shouldn't be above that. So all that he's saying, he's reiterating the best international practices. But however, we have found ourselves in such a situation that government has awarded contracts. I mean, the finance minister said recently, it's about 67 billion. Yes, and if you add the IPPS, which is about close to 1.5 billion, we are talking about close to 80%, which is all owned by government and SOEs. So if you're going to cap it, the first strategy is to put a payment plan to pay all those banks that have financed road or supply certain things or domestic suppliers, so that if all these outstandings are paid, the balance sheet and the non-performing will go down. That is the reason why the first strategy is to ensure that all outstanding, as I've mentioned, the 67 billion and the IPPS $1.5 billion, if you aggregate them and you give a payment plan to the banks, you will be seen to be reducing the non-performing and at the same time improving the solvency of the banks. But he also added, he had something to it. That is my perspective of what I've said. The other ones are saying that the banks should improve their risk management practices. The reason why I'm saying this without fear of favor is that you see banks going to road construction. They have no experts in the road construction financing. And these banks have money. If you go to energy, some of them are financing this energy where they don't even understand. Some of them are financing the BDCs. They don't have the speciality, the risk, the enterprise risk surrounding it. So the governor, as he's saying, they must strengthen these practices. Other than that, they are going to face the bullets. You're going to face the bullet means that you will not be allowed to lend more again. And then if you're going to lend, you have to bring it to us, which I think the Bank of Ghana has already done that. Those banks in crisis are supposed to take their approval loans to them for them to see, so that you don't compound it. So all that he's trying to say is that let us improve the non-performing, because there is a correlation between non-performing and the solvency of the banks. And what the governor is saying, he's not particularly even referring to all the banks. This is more of the state banks and the indigenous bank, the private sector banks. Right. When you go to the other banks, I have the data. They are not as worse as some of the banks coming from Ghana. So I think it's a strategy that needs to be done. And you need to ensure that you strengthen your credit risk, you make your provision as it is, you collateralize the credit, and make sure that the collaterals can be disposed of. And in addition, I think the legal framework of recovery in Ghana must be improved. Because I'm speaking from an experience. We had a case in 2008. It dragged on for 6 years because we could get judgment to sell the property. So, I mean, apart from the governor saying that, there is this exogenous factors outside the banking that our legal and judiciary systems do not support recovery of loans. Although we have passed the Borrowers and Lendings Act, they still don't help the banks to recover. So in as much as we're telling them to improve the credit risk processes, the state must also look at the judiciary and legal process of the recovery. Other than that, we'll be dancing around the music all the time. And don't forget, this non-performing governor is saying from about 2014 up to today, we have not been able to perform less than even 15%. It's ranging between 15% and 20. There was a time at 24%. So that is why the governor, I think he's taking it so serious that let us look at our non-performing so that we can improve the solvency of the banks and at the same time improve liquidity of the bank. So that is what I'll say for the time being.
He also mentions moves to blacklist loan defaulters. I know that has come up time and again, and it would be actually great if he's able to do it. How workable is this?
You know, the same person goes with different names and different companies. They create a myriad of companies. So when they come to you with the Tiahini Enterprises, they go here with the Tiahini Limited. And they don't even go with the Tiahini Limited. They will use their children's name and create another company. But you see, because our system is so, it's not very robust, I mean, the Credit Referencing Bureau would have been able to support it. But unfortunately, even after the Credit Reference Bureau were passed and the institutions were set up, banks are still not having it easy. Blacklisting, I think once upon a time we did it. I think I've forgotten the years. Their names were even published. Their names were published. But you see, at times you don't also blame them. You've gone to do government contract. Government hasn't paid you. Is it your fault not to pay? There is a correlation between government non-payment. And it happened in 2008. It did happen, and the IMF told them that begin to look at how government pay all his outstandings to contractors and service providers. And that helped us to come to 11% in 2013. Since then, we have never, ever come to 11%, let alone 10. So 10 is the benchmark, the IMF benchmark. But unfortunately, we have played above, far more exceedingly above the benchmark. So the blacklisting is good. But as to whether we'll be able to enforce it religiously and sanction those people religiously, then it will be good. Then it will be very, very good. But I begin to wonder, in our system, would we be able to do that?
A question for the gods. Recapitalization, he brought that up as well. How is that drive healthy for Ghana's banking sector?
Let me tell you, the recapitalization has something to do with non-performing, number one. And it has something to do with the microeconomic challenges that the country has gone through over the years. Higher inflation, unstable currency, higher fiscal deficit. But from where the governor is coming from now, at least the variables that we are talking about, inflation is not down because any country with inflation more than 20%, you are not down. But currency stability, at least one measure of the metrics, one of the metrics, we are achieving that one. So that one is good. And the fiscal deficit, I'm reliably being told that the government is so strict about what he had to pay and what he hasn't paid. So that is good. But contracting the inflation, if we can get inflation even to, say, not even 10% to 15%, it will be well and good.
All right.
So when you want to tackle all these things, the recapitalization, it depends on your microeconomic environment, lower inflation, stable currency, which we are achieving, and the lower fiscal deficit. When you achieve that, your currency would always be strong. Unfortunately, anytime we talk about recapitalization, in Ghana, we want people to bring in money. We've forgotten that leg, because if your currency you brought, let me give you a typical example. banks in 2020 or 2019, they capitalized 400 million. If you use the last data of inflation at the 2024, you see that the capital is as low as 23%. Because if higher inflation has eaten, and the currency has eaten all the capital. So if you're able to control inflation and stable currency as we are doing, then every little capitalization that you do will be very meaningful.
Right.
And the reason why our governor was also interested in that, I think he's inherited something. I won't call it albatross. He inherited what you call the GATS, the Ghana Amalgamated Trust, which has supported 3 banks. And all these 3 banks are currently suffering from capitalization. They have little capital because the cost of the GAT alone is killing the banks. And those 3 banks, I think the governor possibly is looking forward and being very proactive. A time will come, if we want to support them, we should revisit all the GAT transactions and begin to see how we can streamline it. Because you see, if you're giving subordinated capital or hybrid capital, you don't charge 19.1%. And when they were doing it, I remember I wrote, because they are not borrowing it to buy treasury bill. They are borrowing to inject in the business. How do you charge them 19%? When the whole year, it will not be made ROE or ROA 19%. And they did. And that has collapsed the bank. So that is why the governor is today saying that I am going to look at the long-term capitalization, and I'm sure he has something in mind about the GAT that has nearly collapsed 3 Ghanaian banks. I won't mention their names.
Okay. I mean, what the picture just painted just looked like an albatross. I just wanted to say that, even though you didn't want to use the word. Well, but so final question in 1 minute, if you can. So given the rollout of these regulations, what should customers and investors expect in the short to medium term?
I think governor is trying to repose confidence in the system. I mean, to those of us who know inside out of it, if you take the foreign banks, I can tell you, and the governor from where he is sitting, he has had an overview, the bird's eye view, and realized that if I don't do these things to support the indigenous bank, one day we'll get up, and the foreign banks would have taken over our economy again, like the way they have taken gold. So for me, what he has said, it is also to support the indigenous banks and to also come out with confidence that, oh, I have seen the non-performing. But as the years go in, I'm going to make sure that these are resolved in 1, 2, 3. And that's why he said that I'm going to meet your leaders, the Ghana Bankers Association, and hear from them their perspective so that I can come out with a policy guideline. And the foreign exchange, what he said, is also very important. You know, the city is performing very well, but you find people charging left and right, here, right, and right, and back, all because in the name they want to maintain their profitability. And governor is worried. You can't take people, extort money from people and make your profitability. So what he's saying that let me give you a price guideline so that if you are a Forex bureau, if you are an authorized dealer bank, if you are everything, you know how to go about the foreign exchange because they need to be a rules and regulation.
Dr.
And for
Richmondi,
me, I've seen it before, so I want to commend him for what he has done.
Thank you so much for your time. I mean, we were speaking before the show. You said this requires so much time to talk about because there's so many things, so many reforms the central bank is introducing. So thank you so much. I will continue the conversation later. I appreciate your time. You're watching The Marketplace. Short break. We'll be right back. All right, and that's it for The Marketplace. More news on our website, myjournline.com/business. OMC's cat fuel prices, petrol going for 11 cedis 77 pesos per litre. That's on myjournline.com. Also, Field Solutions revises end 2025 forecast of cedi to dollar rate at 13 cedis, predicts 12.9% appreciation. myjournline.com/business. My name is Darryl Kwao. Thanks for watching. We will be back same time tomorrow.